all right. Well, everything's a spectrum, right? We all have sensory systems, and we all have sensory difficulties at some point or another. A lot of it's related to stress, where our stress level is. Imagine when you're in a minivan, and I drive a minivan. I love my minivan. I have that thing. I got my kids in the back, the dogs, my wife's there, and the radio's on. It's raining, so that's a high stress situation. So what do? You turn down the radio. You tell them to be quiet. You put the wiper. Reduce that sensory input so you can focus on one thing at a time. That's a sensory struggle. People with PTSD, kids with ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, can hang on to it can develop into a sensory difficulty. Difficulty with touch, sound, sight, these things. So there's that, and then there's also people with disorders. So anybody on the autism spectrum. I said this at a couple of talks, and actually people with autism came up to me later and said, "Well, I have autism and I don't have any sensory issues." I'm not going to debate that. You tell me that's fine. But generally, I see that most people on the autism spectrum generally have sensory processing disorder. And that disorder is different than the difficulty. Disorder gets in the way of life significant to the point where one of my kids, when a teacher spoke, her hands, that's some crisscrossing stuff going on. That gets in the way of life, right? A lot of kids on the spectrum, they do a lot of, they'll cover their ears.
My daughter walks around the house with her noise canceling headset on.
Things like that. It stop them from functioning as best they could. So that's a disorder. And if it's significantly impacting, I suggest going and get therapy. But there's still, therapy is, I always suggest sensory integration therapy. If you know an OT, OTs are the ones that generally administer that kind of therapy, but not all OTs are trained in sensory integration.
That's a good point. Yes. Okay.
But it's not the only thing that works. I think it kind of gets to the bottom. It starts from the ground up, getting to the root of a problem. But there's also, besides getting therapy, there's also a lot you can do at home, and you can modify environmental modifications around your house, and there's activities you can do with your kids as well.
Yeah, that's great, because we're going to talk a little bit about that tonight. Those things you can do around your house. I'm excited for you to share that. It's interesting. I think I heard, I can't remember where it was, but they said that teenagers now the majority of them have adrenal issues. And a lot of it is just stress related with just what they go through on a regular basis. And it does create sensory needs for just kids across the board, whether they're just having difficulties in life without a diagnosis. So
being in a high state of stress can, just kind of like that minivan thing. Another way I try to explain it to people is, we all struggle with sensory issues. And if you're in a high state of stress, like let's say you're at a party and you're having a conversation, and you're at that high level of cognition. You're having an intellectual conversation, and you're hobnobbing, and everything's going great. But you really have to go to the bathroom. Right. You're going to be able to remember. You have to take care of that sensory need. You have to deal with that. Same thing. It's along those lines. Like you have to go take care of that sensory need before I can get to the higher cognitive thing. So a lot of our kids struggle with that. Maybe the noise is too loud. Maybe they're not feeling their bodies as they should, or the vestibular system's off.
Right.
Things like that.
Yeah, that's a very good analogy, because I think we've all experienced that. So at least maybe not at a party, but just in general.
Yeah, somewhere else. Yeah.
Right, exactly.